Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Now that we're getting lots of tomatoes and the summer harvest is really in full swing, or getting in full swing anyway, I should say, I thought it might be a fun time to take you guys out to the garden. We'll harvest some tomatoes and basil together, and I'm going to show you my favorite really simple summer lunch. So let's head on over to the tomato bed. So we're going to need probably about maybe 10 or so cherry tomatoes. We don't need too many. Let me just show you how the tomatoes are doing. All right, so here's our tomatoes. If you hear some basketball noises in the background, don't mind those. My son and my husband are out playing basketball this morning. So I'm just going to grab a little handful of cherry tomatoes. I want to try to get a variety of types, but of course, these sun golds are my favorite. So we've got those. Let me go grab a couple of those red Mass Wild cherries too. All right, I gotta watch my step through here because I was out in the garden first thing this morning and there was a garter snake out here. Now I'm actually happy to have him in my garden. He's not venomous, but I still don't wanna get bitten even if it's not a venomous snake. Those aren't quite ready yet. So it might be mostly sun golds for today. I have some more tomatoes in the house too. So if there aren't enough out here, don't worry, we can still make this delicious lunch happen. Okay, that should be good. I might mix up a couple in the house that we have just to get more of a variety of colors. All right, let's go find some basil to harvest. There's a few more little sun golds over here. I don't think we need any more for our lunch, but since I'm out here, I might as well harvest these. Bring them in the house. Over here, these are actually sun sugar, which is incredibly similar to sun gold and I think equally delicious. So we'll just bring that little bowl of beauties into our house. Now let's see. I have been harvesting a lot of basil out here, so it's going to be a challenge to find a plant that has some basil left for us to harvest. Let's see. So see how there's one main stem and there's two leaves coming off either side? You want to pinch right above where those leaves join. We got this little basil here because now what's going to happen is, see these tiny little leaves where that was? Now those are going to turn to main leaves and it's going to branch into two main stems from that section that we picked. So that's going to give us overall a bigger basil harvest. This plant doesn't actually look that amazing. I think what we're going to do is go up to my deck and I'm going to grab some basil from there because I have the spicy bush basil, which would be really delicious in this meal. So I think what we're going to do is harvest some of this spicy bush basil here. Now you can hear all my animals going crazy. My chickens want to come out to free range and my cat is out talking to me. So we just need a little bit. So what you're going to do, let me find a good example to show you. So see here, how there's one main stem here, coming out with a couple little leaves on the bottom of it. We're just gonna pinch right above those leaves there and pull this little part off. And now what's gonna happen, see where we pinched these little, like out of this little node between the leaves and the main stem, it's gonna develop multiple main stems. So that's going to lead overall to a really bushy plant. You can see this plant, I've harvested this way several times and it's looking nice and bushy. It's a nice big plant there. So that's probably really all that we need. We don't really need that much basil for this. So I'm gonna bring this in and I'm gonna show you how I make my favorite summer lunch with it. So for this recipe, you're going to want to either prepare or purchase some balsamic glaze. Balsamic glaze is really easy to make. All you're going to do is put your balsamic vinegar into a pan. You're going to heat it for quite a while actually over a fairly low heat until it's reduced by about 50% or so. It should get nice and thick. I'm going to put it on like a medium-low type of heat and we're gonna just let that steam and reduce for a little bit. And then this is going to be delicious drizzled over our tomato toast. So this balsamic glaze is also amazing on say something like a caprese salad. A caprese salad has a really similar flavor profile to what we're making today. It's got the tomatoes, the basil, and then of course it's got fresh mozzarella. So if you slice up some fresh tomatoes, some fresh mozzarella, sprinkle a little bit of basil, olive oil, salt, pepper, and then drizzle some of this balsamic glaze over it, that is another amazing dish. It would make a great lunch, a great side dish, a great salad. Pretty much, that's another one of my favorite things to eat in the summer, which is actually very similar to this. But today we're talking about our tomato toast, so let's finish up with that. So you can definitely purchase balsamic glaze if you don't want to make it yourself. It does take a little bit of time to make, but I like to make it myself because then I just know what's in it. Some people add sugar to it. Some purchased balsamic glazes do have sugar in them. I don't add anything to it. I just take the balsamic vinegar itself and just reduce it down until it gets nice and thick and syrupy. Now you can probably see the steam coming off of this. So all the steam that evaporates is moisture that is being released from our balsamic vinegar. It's not really syrupy yet. You can see it's still pretty thin, but it is reducing little by little. So a few more minutes and I think this will be ready. Incidentally, while you're making this balsamic glaze, do not lean over the pan and inhale the steam coming off of it. That's a very sinus opening experience and not something that I recommend. So you can see that our glaze is coming along. It's not fully thickened yet, but it's definitely a lot thicker than it was. Now this is going to continue to thicken up once we remove it from the heat and it sits. We don't want it to keep going until it's quite as thick as we want. We want to stop a little bit shy of that. And so you basically want to reduce it by about 50% or so. I mean, it depends on what you're going for. It depends on how thick you want it. I usually reduce it by about 50%. So I think this is about right. So I'm going to take this off the heat and chill it for a few minutes, and then we can add it onto our toast. Now this is going to be a lot more than we need for this recipe. I like to make extra of this because it does take a little while to make. So I like to take extra and then store it in my fridge. I think it is probably actually a shelf-stable product, but I store it in my fridge just to be safe. Okay, so I've got our bowl of tomatoes and basil in the house. You can see that, well, maybe you can't see. I'll try to show you without spilling all my tomatoes. But you can see that I switched out some of these sun-gold tomatoes for a few more red ones, just because I like to have a little bit of variety. So what we're gonna do for now, I'm just going to take these all off their stems, and I'm just going to put them into this little ramekin, and then I'm going to set them aside for now. And we'll come back to them in just a minute. So we'll probably need, maybe I'll do about 12 of these since these red ones are pretty small, but we'll just see. You know, I'm just gonna do all of them. Why not? Might as well be decadent, right? Okay, so I've just taken them off their stems. You can see I've got a mix of yellow and golden tomatoes in here. We're just gonna set those aside and come back to them in just a minute. Okay, so I have this beautiful loaf of sourdough bread here. This is actually sourdough discard bread. I do have a recipe video for this filmed, which I'll link below, but really any delicious good bread would do. Homemade is amazing, but if you don't have homemade, then you could get it from a local bakery. That would also be delicious. So I'm just going to slice off a slice of this, and I'm going to lightly toast it, and then I'll show you what we're gonna do next. Of course, when you get a bread with a nice crust, it's always a little bit of a challenge to cut through it, but I think it's worth it. So there's our slice of bread there. I'm just gonna cut this in half because it's gonna fit in my toaster a lot better that way. If you have a big toaster, you can leave it whole. So I'm just gonna pop these in the toaster. I'll meet you back here in just a minute. So while our bread's toasting, we're gonna prep our tomatoes. First, I'm going to turn on my broiler on high. Now, while that preheats, I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil to our tomatoes, a little bit of salt and pepper. So I'm just gonna stir this up to get everything coated with olive oil. Then we'll add a little bit of, I have Himalayan pink salt here, but you could use whatever salt you like. A little bit of fresh ground pepper. Just gonna stir that up. Then I'm going to pop these under the broiler just until they start to really kind of wrinkle a little bit and start to burst just a little. We want them to be nice and heated up, but we don't want them to be mushy. So I'm going to pop those in. Usually I like to set my timer, the first time they go in, I'll set my timer for maybe 2 minutes, and then I'll keep checking it every minute after that because you definitely do not want to let these burn. So let's pop these in the broiler and then we'll get back to our bread. Okay, so as soon as your bread comes out of the toaster, while it's nice and warm, you're going to take a garlic clove. You see I have a little mini clove here. I'm going to just kind of cut it in half and just peel it. So you're just gonna cut it in half and peel it. Then you're gonna take the cut side here and just rub it on the bread that you just toasted. And the heat from the bread is going to basically release some of the garlic oils and just ever so slightly cook your garlic and really incorporate it into your bread. Incidentally, this is also a great way to make fresh homemade garlic bread. So I like to rub it on pretty heavily. It gives you that nice, it's gonna be pretty pungent because even with the heat of your bread, this garlic is not fully cooking, but it gives it a really nice garlic flavor. So we just get that rubbed on the bread nicely. Now, once you've got the garlic on your bread, the next thing you're going to do is get some ricotta cheese. So this is just store-bought ricotta. You could definitely make your own. That would make it even better. But I just take like a nice, big, generous spoonful and kind of smear it on each slice like that. And this is a nice mild flavor. It kind of gives you a little counterbalance to that really pungent garlic. So I just put, you know, a generous coating on there. So we've got that on both slices of bread. Then I'm going to just sprinkle a little sprinkle of our salt over that. Now I'm going to take that basil that we harvested. I'm just going to take a few of the leaves and tear them into little pieces and just sort of spread them out as evenly as I can over this ricotta. And even just tearing it, I can already smell that delicious basil smell. But what's going to happen is once we put the hot tomatoes on top of this basil, that's going to release the basil smell even more and release the basil flavor even more is what I should actually say. So we actually harvested a little more basil than we need. You don't really need very much basil for this, but I'm sure we can find another use for the rest of it. So there, you can see our toast is ready for our tomatoes to come out. Okay, so these tomatoes look good. This is what we want. See how they're just a little bit brown? I don't even know if you can hear me talking out for that sizzling, but see how they're just a little bit browned on the edges and see how they're starting to burst? But they're not fully cooked yet, so that's what we want. So we're just gonna set these down and then we're gonna get them loaded up on our toast. Okay, so we're just going to spoon out our broiled tomatoes. I usually just kind of give them a little bit of a pat so they kind of settle into the ricotta there. And we have one trying to escape. But there, doesn't this look amazing? So that's almost done. All we need to do is add our balsamic glaze and it's gonna be perfect. Oh, I should mention too, this makes it a little bit extra juicy, but I usually kind of take this and spoon it over the top. If you don't want it to be quite as, I don't know if it really makes it soggy, but if you don't want it to be quite as liquidy, you don't have to do this. But this is a mix of like the tomato juice, the olive oil, salt, and pepper. I think it has a lot of good flavor that I don't like to waste. So I spoon that over the top. Okay, so our balsamic glaze has cooled and hopefully thickened up a little bit. We're just going to drizzle this just a little bit, or a generous amount, depending on your taste, over this. And that looks perfect. All right, let's take a bite and try it. That is perfect. It tastes like summer. I definitely recommend making this. Sometimes I'll even make it in the winter with grocery store tomatoes. It's not nearly as good, but that's just how much I love it. So definitely give this a try. If you do, let me know how you like it. And let me know how you like to use your fresh summer garden tomatoes. What is your favorite simple lunch to make with your summer produce? I'd love to get some new ideas and just some new recipes to try. So I hope you're having a great day. I'll talk to you later and I'll see you next time. Bye. See you next time.